Afternoon, everyone. Main focus. Hopefully, I'm in focus. Right. So this week's video, I was a little bit stuck for ideas as to what to do this week because the weather's been absolutely dreadful up here. The last 10 days, it's just constantly poured down. So motivation to get out with the camera has been pretty low. But secondly, as you can imagine, running a gallery at Christmas, we've got the usual sort of Christmas rush. But also it's changed a little bit this year, obviously with the tier restrictions, meaning that normally a lot of the tourists who come to the lakes can't come. So they're doing a lot of the shopping online. So the last week, 10 days, I've been absolutely snowed under with online orders, which is great, obviously. But yeah, a lot of boring donkey work behind the scenes, packaging stuff up and getting stuff ready to go in the post so people receive their stuff in time for Christmas. So yeah, been a bit busy with that, and time for doing these sort of videos has been a bit limited. So I was a bit stuck for what to do, and I was looking back through my videos over the past 6 months, and quite surprisingly, when I was looking at the number of views that some of them were getting. I mean, I don't tend to look at the views, to be honest. I just put them out. But the most popular one in terms of views was one I did back in the middle of the summer to do with selling prints. And yeah, when I put that out, I thought, people would probably find this really tedious, me just talking relentlessly to the camera for 15 minutes. But looking at the feedback, people seem to get a lot out of that video, which obviously is great, and I really appreciate you tuning into that one. Lots of good questions, lots of interest about the business side of running the gallery, and yeah, so with this quiet period with the camera, I just thought now would probably be a good time to put a bit more meat on the bone, if you like, as to the sort of practicalities of running a gallery on a high street. So today I'm going to take you on a little bit of a sort of whistle-stop tour of my little space here in Keswick. It's not very big. Any of you who have been in this gallery already, I've met a good number of you who watch these videos already, which is great. They'll know that this place is quite low. So if you're like me and you're 6 foot or taller, if you're coming in future, I'll probably bring a hard hat. But yeah, it's got a nice bit of character, this place, I think. So I'm going to take you around here, do a little bit of behind the scenes, and also sort of talk to you a little bit more about the sort of practicalities of running a gallery on a high street, and a bit more about the business side of things. Okay, so I think before I get into the sort of nitty-gritty of running this place on a day-to-day basis, I think it's important to just give you a little bit of background as to how I actually ended up here. So it goes back to February 2018. So I was working at Sellafield in a shift job. I'd worked there many years. And while the money was great, the work-life balance I had was really quite poor. If any of you are in relationships out there with one of you working a 9 to 5 and the other person working shifts, you'll probably know that you can end up a little bit like passing ships in the night. And I certainly had that with my partner, and it really wasn't any good. So the previous owner who ran the gallery, well, this gallery has always actually been a gallery. It's in various different forms, but the previous owner gave me a call out of the blue and basically asked me if I wanted to take it on. And I was a bit shocked, to be honest, because I thought he was joking, really. But I was actually a contributing photographer to that gallery, and he was aware that I was wanting to sort of make the step into full-time photography at some point in the near future, if I could. So he floated the idea to me, and I thought, well, as I say, I thought he was joking, but I sort of ran all the numbers and the practicalities of it, and I really lent on my best mate, John Graham, who he runs 2 really successful coffee shops in the Lake District, and he really knows his stuff about business. I mean, I'm very new to this. But we ran the numbers and ran all the sort of scenarios and whatnot, and really we couldn't find a sort of negative to taking the plunge really. So end of February 2018, I left my job, and end of April, start of May 2018, we opened this place, and it was quite liberating actually, to be honest. I thought it would be a bigger sort of change to me than it actually was. You know, I as soon as I started working for myself, it felt like the thing I should have been doing all along, really. So that really caught me by surprise a little bit. One of the challenges that faced me when I took this place on was, and while this isn't a knock on the previous owner, because everyone has their own sort of ways they want to run a business and all that sort of stuff, but the thing that struck me immediately when I took this place over was that it needed a bit of a refresh, and it's quite a small space in here, and really you need to make best use of that small space. And I felt taking the place over, it felt a bit cramped basically. And the other thing which is really important when you're displaying artwork is you need light. You need as much natural light as possible, and then also some nice sort of bright light in here. So myself and John set about, it took us about 10 days in the end. We tried to sort of cram it into a week, but really it was never going to happen in a week. We set about stripping away loads and loads of old display panelling off the walls, because those display panels were sort of encroaching into the floor space. So we stripped all them back. We pulled up all the old carpet. We give all the walls a lick of paint, just standard white across all the walls, again, to get as much light into the room as possible. And just tried to sort of make the place a little bit more airy. Also with the window certainly needed sort of opening out a little bit. And you know, while I always have a couple of images on display in the window, again, I want to make best use of that natural light, because where this gallery is actually situated in Keswick, it's sort of tucked away and it doesn't really get an awful lot of light during the day, so you need to make as much sort of use of that as you can. So you're probably wondering out there what it's actually like to run a landscape photography gallery, and the short answer is it's very enjoyable. I really enjoy it, otherwise I wouldn't be doing it. From a positive sort of standpoint, there's many. First off, my work-life balance is far better than it's ever been. My previous job at Sellafield, working shifts, as I mentioned, you know, the money was good, but money isn't everything when it's to the detriment of your sort of your personal life and your well-being. So making this switch to doing this has meant that I've got a lot more time at home with my partner and my young son, and just my sort of overall well-being is just so much better now. From a photographic standpoint, it's really good in that the sort of peak times when you're out with the camera, which is autumn and winter, tends to coincide with the quieter periods in the gallery. So the tourist season, which is obviously summer, is usually quite a quiet period for being out with the camera. So the two sort of work in tandem quite well, in that the times when it's quiet in the shop, I can be out shooting, and the times when it's really busy, I'm not so fussed about being out shooting. So that works really well. I guess lastly, really, the thing that I enjoy most is that the success and failure of this business really lives and dies with me. I can't blame anyone if things go wrong. I can keep my own time. I'm not answerable to anyone. And I guess for some that would be quite, you know, understandably, that's quite a lot of pressure. And it is quite a lot of pressure, but I don't tend to think of it like that. I tend to see it more as a sort of challenge that, you know, I need to sort of rise to meet every day. And I'm always looking at different ways and means as to how I can grow this business. So that aspect of it I really enjoy. And to be honest with you, I don't know why I wasn't working for myself many years ago, really, because, you know, I enjoy it that much. On the downsides to this, there are a few. I suppose one of them is it can be quite soul destroying in the off seasons, where you can be sat in the gallery and not see a soul for 8 hours of the day. So that can be a little bit depressing. There is some negative feedback, I guess, that I've made. If you follow me on Twitter or other social media, you've probably seen me joking about some of the comments that you hear at the window, and I did make a little bit of a reference to that on the selling prints video. I'll put a link somewhere so you can have a look at that one. But yeah, you do get some sort of negative feedback, I guess, but it doesn't bother me. It's not. I find quite a lot of it quite funny, to be honest. So yeah, running the gallery on a day-to-day basis for me is a really enjoyable thing to do, and certainly so far after 2.5 years, I'm really, really glad I made that choice. Okay, so let's get into the sort of nitty-gritty of how I actually make any money in here, because that's the name of the game ultimately. First and foremost, I think it's important to discuss what I put on the walls in terms of the type of images. So I mentioned in that video about selling prints that people generally want images that are sort of bright, colourful and warm, and that's generally because they want their homes to feel bright and warm. They don't want images generally that are cold, because they make the house feel cold. Now, as a photographer, you probably think, well, you just want to buy an image because you like it, but ultimately, Joe Blogg's punter, who isn't a photographer, they have other considerations, things like the decor, the sofa colour, the carpet colour. All these things factor into the decision to buy one of these things or not. So yeah, 70-75% of the stuff is warmer, brighter images. I do have cooler, sort of wintry images and more muted toned images, just to show a bit of variety in the work and just offset some of those other sort of warmer stuff, if you like. It's a tricky one as a photographer, because when I go out, I just want to shoot for myself. I just want to take images that I like. And over this last 2.5 years, what I've found that works for me best is that I tend to try and separate my shoots, in that I'll either go out specifically to shoot for the gallery, or I'll go out specifically just to shoot for myself. And if the two happen to sort of cross over, then great. But generally for me, it works best if I try and separate the two, because I don't like the feeling of, while I'm out shooting for myself, then constantly thinking, oh, I really need to get this shot for the gallery because this will work better. I just end up getting distracted, and I sort of take my eye off the ball a little bit. So yeah, warmer images, brighter images tend to sell much better than the cooler stuff. Okay, so the next thing that I've got on my list is printing. Now, printing's become something of a sort of fashionable subject in landscape photography over the last few years, and I can understand why, because for many the final print is the last stage in the process, and there's nothing quite like seeing your work in print and that feeling that you get from seeing the image on a nice sort of fine art paper. There's nothing quite like it, and I would highly recommend any of you out there to really embrace printing and do as much of it as you can. But for me, in the context of this gallery, the printing process isn't the final stage. That actually ends up being the framing and presentation. That's the end of the road for me. I'll touch on that in a little bit further on in this discussion. But in terms of printing in this gallery, firstly, I'll discuss the paper type. So I would say 70-75% of the paper I use in here is Photo Speed Smooth Pearl 290. Now that paper, because I print an awful lot in bulk, I have to consider cost. So that paper strikes a really good balance between being sort of cost effective, but also producing really good quality results. You know, it has a nice sort of punchy, contrasty look to it, and yeah, very reliable paper for me, that one. The limited edition prints, like the one that you're seeing on the screen here, the Buttermade Bloom print, I tend to use NST Bright White for the limited editions. It's a higher grade paper, you get slightly better results from it, but also because it's got a slight texture to it, it does a better job than the Smooth Pearl of picking out those little fine details, like you see that nice patch of heather in the foreground. It just sort of comes up a bit nicer with the more textured paper. In terms of who prints my stuff, well, the smaller stuff I print at home myself, but for the bigger sort of A1 prints and the big panoramics, I have a local print lab just outside Carlisle called Castle Framing, and they do all my big stuff. They've done all my printing since I opened, and it's really important that if you're doing prints through an external company, you find a printer that does really consistent, accurate printing. You know, there's nothing worse than sending your image off to a company to print and ending up getting something back that looks nothing like what you've got on your screen. So yeah, really important you find a reliable printer. I mean, for me, it's just one less thing that I need to worry about. You know, I can send files to Castle Framing and I know that what I'm going to get back is absolutely what I'm looking at on the screen. So it's, yeah, something I don't need to worry about. If you're doing it yourself though, if you're doing printing at home, it's absolutely vital that you get your monitor calibrated and you know, you do lots of test printing to get your prints nice and accurate. I've seen so many images just ruined because people haven't spent the time actually calibrating their monitor. But as I say, that's not the end of the process for me. That comes with framing and presentation, which I'm going to talk about a bit more here. Okay, so this next one is something that for me is really overlooked and probably in the context of running this gallery is the most important part of the whole process. And that's framing and presentation. When people come in here and they're thinking of buying a frame print, they need to feel like they're buying a product that's premium and that has had a lot of time and thought and effort put into it. And one of the things that always makes me laugh when I see landscape photographers spending thousands of pounds on the latest and greatest cameras and lenses, they'll take their images and then go and buy a £15 IKEA frame to put them in, which really for me just makes no sense at all, but each to their own, I guess. But in here, the frame choice is probably even more important than the type of paper that I printed on, really, because the frame can almost sell the picture, and I've heard that commented by customers many times. In terms of the frames that I run on a day-to-day basis, I've usually got sort of 3 or 4 on display. The first one is the light oak. That one's a really good all-round. I tend to use that one on brighter, warmer images. But because it's solid oak, it's still got quite a premium feel to it. And it'll go with most people's home decor interior. You know, it's got a nice sort of bright, airy feel to it, that frame. For the moodier, darker images, I tend to use 2 or 3 variants on the same theme, which is like a sort of distressed dark frame. It's got a sort of handcrafted feel to it almost, but it also has nice sort of golden flecks in it. So a lot of those sort of dramatic images that I've got on the wall with, dark clouds but really strong light breaking through, the gold flecks in those frames really tend to sort of pick out those brighter parts really well. So I've got 2 or 3 of those in various sort of different thicknesses. But yeah, really popular with customers, that one. I'd use 2 variants of a white frame for the more sort of muted stuff. Certainly for snowy images, winter images, the white frames tend to sort of go really well. And also the white frames, people quite like them in sort of more minimalist, modern type homes, if you like. You know, you can see already the sort of really ultra clean, modern kitchen type setup. So the white frames tend to go well in that sort of environment. One thing that really gets overlooked, and I never hear any discussion about, is the type of glass that you use. The glass comes in many different sort of variants and price points, but generally sort of standard glass, people, just because your eyes are so accustomed to seeing framed prints in standard glass, you just assume that that's what they look like. But if you compare a standard glass against, say, a museum glass, the difference is absolutely incredible. It's literally like the first time you put HD TV on. It is that stark a difference. So when I hear about, photographers going on about megapixels and dynamic range and all that sort of stuff, that is important, don't get me wrong, but the biggest difference I have ever seen in the sort of quality of a print is the type of glass that it's framed behind. So if you're thinking of, putting a fair bit of investment into a really nice picture that you've made and you want to put up on your wall at home, even though it costs quite a bit more, I would highly consider getting museum glass, because it is so much better than standard glass. The next video I'm going to do with Scott, who's my framer, you'll love Scott, he's a real character. We're going to do a side-by-side comparison between standard glass and museum glass to show you the difference. Hopefully it'll come across on the camera. But yeah, I'd highly recommend, if you're ever going down to your framers, ask them to, usually most framers will have a sort of sample mock-up print with a sort of side-by-side comparison. Ask to see it, because honestly the difference is ridiculous. The really high-grade quality museum glass, it is literally like you can't see glass there. So yeah, can make a huge difference to the quality and presentation of your work. Right, so I'm going to try and wrap this one up here, because I need to get out of here and do the big Christmas shop. Not looking forward to that. People are panic buying already, absolute idiots. But yeah, hopefully I've covered most of the things that you wanted to hear about running a gallery on a high street. If you think of anything that I've missed, just leave me a comment. I always try and, I always respond to all the comments. I'll certainly do my best to answer your questions. The next video, I'm going to be going up to my framers, Scott Richardson, who's a absolutely brilliant lad, real character, but knows his stuff, knows framing inside out, and it'll sort of complete this little sort of series, if you like, on the sort of day-to-day running of a gallery and framing prints and all that sort of stuff. Hopefully you'll find it interesting. I know it's something that I get a lot of questions about, both on here and people physically coming in the shop. They want to know a little bit more about how this stuff is framed and presented. So yeah, hopefully you'll get a lot out of that one. But hopefully you'll have an enjoyable Christmas. I know it's a difficult time at the minute with all these restrictions and whatnot, but yeah, have a great Christmas, and I'll catch you on the next one, probably in the new year.